As you all know, and as you'll see in our slides, we have very aggressive goals that we have. And we are really trying to be out in front, trying to do what we can to stimulate the biofuel industry as much as we possibly can. So again, I want to thank the state of Hawaii and Bio for allowing us to be here. And what I want to do is I want to sort of set a context for what we are all about. The reason that the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Army are so into trying to get rid of our dependence on foreign oil is because we have to worry about getting that oil to the front line. I would say that about the majority of our convoys we have going to our forward operating bases are actually in the form of fuel and water. And that fuel is very vulnerable. That fuel is very vulnerable to attack. And so we have to look at the context of why are we really doing this? Are we doing this because it's just a great thing to do? Yes, it is, but we also have people's lives at stake. So that is the context that we are within the Department of Navy and the Department of Defense. That's kind of how we are adjusting our scope and our vision. So if we look at the overall energy profile, you can see that the majority of our energy goes into ships and planes. When you look across the board, 75% of our energy within the United States Navy goes to ships and planes and our forward operating bases. Only 25% goes to our shore installations, like for instance Pearl Harbor here in Hawaii. Only 25% goes to that. So we have to really be concentrated on those ships and those planes, and that's why biofuels is so important for us. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have some very aggressive goals. And back in October of 2009, the Secretary of the Navy, Secretary Mavis, set out these goals. And I want to pay attention to the second one up there and also the fifth one. The second one is talking about sailing the Great Green Fleet. And that Great Green Fleet, we want to deploy that in 2016, but in 2012, we want to actually have that Great Green Fleet go out in local operations. And when we say that we're going to deploy that, that's all the destroyers, cruisers, and the air wing will be operating on biofuels. We'll also have a carrier and a submarine there. Obviously, they're nuclear powered, but we want to make sure that they also are using the biofuels wherever we possibly can, that whole Great Green Fleet. Now, the bottom goal is very aggressive. By 2020, 50% of our energy we want to have come from alternative sources. 50% by 2020. And when Secretary Mavis first set these goals, he alluded to the speech that President Kennedy gave when he talked about putting a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. And he wanted to do that by the end of the decade. Well, we sort of have our own moon that we have to go towards. And so we are fast approaching deadlines that we need to be on right now in order to get there by 2020. So we have that in context as we move forward. Now, with our biofuels, we want to make sure that they are completely drop-in replacements. And a lot of people have that understanding of what that third generation alternative fuel standard really is. But we realize, and you should realize too, that we are operating in an environment where we're using the same, we will be using in 2020 the same ships and planes that we're using right now. So we can't afford to do any engine reconfiguration at all. So that's why we have to have the full drop-in replacement fuel. So we've been making some great strides. On Earth Day this past year, no coincidence, we flew the F/A-18 Hornet, which we call the Green Hornet. And we flew that on a 50-50 blend of biofuels, camelina. And we went supersonic, 1.2 Mach. And that was really incredible that we did this. And they completed the testing in the summer of this year, and they tested the full range of what a Hornet would normally experience. And throughout that whole test, never did it hesitate. It didn't realize that it had a 50-50 blend of biofuels in the tank. And that was what was incredible about that. Well, just recently also, in October, we had the Riverine combat boat that actually went on a 50-50 blend. In this case, it was a algae-based biofuel. And it went in excess of speeds of 40 knots, which it does normally. And again, the engine did not hesitate at all. So the Green Hornet was on camelina-based, the Riverine combat boat was on algae-based. But we are somewhat feedstock agnostic. And I say that to a point. We want to make sure that we are still in compliance with the Energy Independence and Security Act, Section 526, for greenhouse gas emissions. So we want to make sure we're doing that, have that criteria in the back of our mind too. So we have set out a very aggressive timeline, and by the end of 2012, we want to have all of our platforms, all of our ships, all of our planes certified to use biofuels. And so we're marching on that path. And then in 2012, as I mentioned, we're going to have that carrier strike group, that green strike group, going to be going out in local operations operating on biofuels. And in 2016, we'll have the Great Green Fleet. So we know what we need to be doing, and we're marching off in that. And then for our biofuel demands, we use JP5, we use F76, we also use some JP8 as well too. But we want to make sure that the industry realizes what our biofuel demand actually is. And I know it may be very difficult to see this chart at the back of the room, but basically by 2020, we need 8 million barrels of petroleum, biofuel petroleum. And that's 4 million of each, F76 and 4 million of the JP5, approximately. But that is a very aggressive goal, but we want to get there. We know that we can get there. So when we look across our avenue of how we're going to approach that as we're on this road, we realize that we have to create that demand, and we have to create that demand through a number of different partnerships, because we know that we can't do it alone. The people at Defense Logistics Agency Energy, DLA Energy, they're the main people that we buy our fuel through, because they buy it in bulk for us. So DLA Energy and ATA have done a strategic alliance back in March of this year that they have now started to cooperate. They were cooperating before, but now we have a piece of paper, a document that says, hey, we're going to cooperate a lot more, because we're trying to create, again, that demand signal. Creating that demand signal for the biofuel industry, for venture capitalists, for all those people that are very important to standing up a biofuel industry. And I like to allude the biofuel industry, a friend of mine, Sarah Bittleman from USDA, actually talked about standing up a biofuel industry is kind of like a pop-up book. You want it to all stand up at the same time. And that's very difficult. If one piece stands up and not the other, the whole thing may fall apart. So we want to try to get it all to stand up at the same time. So we have this alliance with ATA and with DLA Energy, but then we have also done a partnership in January where we signed a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to work on a number of different types of projects. And so Bill Hagee and myself have been structuring a way forward to how we can go about doing and moving this MOU forward. Now, one of the first regions that we chose was right here in Hawaii. And we figured that the best way and the best area that we could possibly choose would be Hawaii, because if we can stand it up here, then we might be able to stand it up in other places. Let's try to prove that model. So we're trying to build that business model and get it all stood up right here in Hawaii. So that has been very, very unique in that MOU in working together with them. So now when we look specifically at Hawaii, and again, you may not be able to read all of these, but basically we're working together with HECO, the Hawaiian Electric Company, we're working with ATA, we're working with USDA, and we have set out what we feel will be our production goals. And basically, with HECO and with DOD, we are looking at probably around 280 million gallons that we're going to need here in the state of Hawaii. Now, that's not including ATA. When you throw commercial aviation in there, it's probably going to be about another 230, 240 million gallons. So almost 500 million gallons of biofuel is what our overall requirement is going to be. And that's pretty huge. Now that's not just ships and planes, but we also have a couple of, DOD has a couple of peaking plants that we also want to put up. And that's at Kenoi Bay, at Schofield Barracks, and then also at Pearl Harbor as well too. So this is the context that we have for the state of Hawaii. But I will tell you this though, we have been making a lot of great progress. And a lot of you may not know this, but we already have a 100% renewable energy platform within the United States Navy. Yes, we do. It's called the USS Constitution, and it is actually still a commissioned vessel. And it still does take out and deploy. Just in the Boston Harbor, but it does deploy. Anyway, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Директор по энергетике, грубо говоря, замминистра морского флота.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Не морского флота.